and 2008, I walked away from him.
Welcome to God at Work, stories of calling, courage, and conviction. Through real stories and meaningful conversations, we'll discover how God shows up in the boardroom, the job site, and beyond. Here's your hosts, Gina Ventola and Adam Kemper. Good morning. Welcome to God at Work. This morning, we're joined by Denny Ying. Denny is a U.S. veteran, entrepreneur, and consulting partner with Era Group, where he helps leaders steward their organizations more wisely through cost intelligence and operational clarity. His work is grounded in faith, service, and integrity, shaped by his journey from military service to business leadership. Denny is passionate about helping organizations grow sustainably while honoring people, purpose, and principles that matter. Denny, welcome to the show this morning. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Gina. Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
Denny, we're so glad you're here. And I want to hear more about your story. Could you share? I know you do these amazing bike rides. Could you share about them?
Yeah, so 2018, I was in a point in my life, and I guess I call that midlife crisis. Um, and I didn't know what to do with my life. Things are just kind of falling apart. It almost feel like a common theme looking back for the last 4 decades. And I needed to do something. The name Forrest Gump came up, and I was not going to run across the country. So I bought a bicycle. I started pedaling. I started pedaling. The first ride was from Denver to Chicago, and at the time I was living in California, but I just figured I didn't have cycling muscle. I just bought a bicycle, so maybe it's smart to go from elevation to lower, just to make it a little easier. And so I did that ride. I was riding for um, mental health, veteran suicide awareness, and on the road I learned so much about in terms of suicide for law enforcement, fire services, teen suicide, postpartum depression, all kinds of stuff. And so I went back to California, and I did my second ride from San Francisco to Times Square right after. And I dropped the veteran portion of it because while it's very close to heart, what I realize is while the numbers are there, 22 a day, statistically, but um, mental health is a human problem. It's not a veteran problem, if that makes sense. And so I went back and I started writing for mental health and just suicide awareness. And between the two rides, I actually lost a friend, really close friend, to suicide. One day I was so originally I was going to ride out of San Francisco on August 21st, 2018. I ended up pushing it a week because now that, on my first ride going from Denver to Chicago, it was going down, even though there's, what do you call those, rolling hills, but they're not mountains, right? And now going through from San Francisco to New York, I have to go through Sierra Mountains, Rocky Mountains, and Appalachians. So I thought, okay, maybe I should do a little bit of training. So I was on the ride in mountains in Sacramento, and um, I got a phone call from one of my friend's girlfriend, and she was saying, Erlena killed herself. I said, what do you mean? And she was sobbing, and she said, Erlena killed herself. I said, what are you talking about? And she said, Erlena killed herself. And
Mm.
so, while I was on the bike, I the thought came to my mind. I said, I know Erlena knew about me riding. If she was on the road with me, maybe she will still be here today. While that is natural, but what I realize is it has nothing to do with me, right? I mean, she would never be on the road with me. right? And so, but it's a reminder of how important and how relevant depression, mental health, suicide is. Even though it's not something that people talk about, like to talk about, it's not a subject that you gather around Thanksgiving or Christmas family gathering and talk about depression, right? But it doesn't mean that they're not there, especially in this season, actually. If you think about all the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, actually, sometimes it's harder for many people than people realize. I was in the grocery store the other day and I had to remind myself, be gentle with people, be kind, because there's probably a lot of anxiety happening, people trying to get ready for the holiday, this and that. I mean, trying to give gifts that they don't have money for. I don't know. I don't know, and there's probably a lot of stuff going on. Um,
Yeah.
but people don't like to talk about it, right? It doesn't mean that they're not there. And so I have to really remind myself, if people are in a rush, you know, just it's okay. It's okay. Just be kind and to be gentle with people. Anyhow, so that was a reminder of how important, how relevant mental health, suicide awareness was. And yeah, so I put Elena's name on one of my sleeves um, that I was carrying while I was riding across, just so I can remember why this is important. Um, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity. It's not something you can buy with money. It's a bike ride like this. Um, it's either you have done it or you have not, right? And it's not like how much money you can throw at it. So I'm really grateful that life happened a certain way that prompted me to get out there, get on the bike. I learned a lot about myself that I did not know 2017 or beginning of 2018. I have no idea that part of me exists. And that's a part of me. It's not all of me. And so, anyhow, thank you for asking. Hopefully that answers your question. And feel free to ask any question. I'd be more happy to elaborate.
Well, thanks for sharing.
In those journeys that you did, and thank you for sharing that, where did you see God in that? Where was
You
God with
know,
you?
it is so interesting that you say that because um, I didn't grow up in church, and I came to learning about him pretty late. It's another story. I'd be more happy to share that. But 2005, I accepted. I was very hot. I um, was going to Taiwan. I went to Taiwan for a mission trip with the church. I went to Mexico with Campus Crusade from college. I was pretty hot serving him, but my faith was very immature. I didn't realize my relationship with people has nothing to do with my relationship with him. And 2008, I walked away from him. So 2018, he was not in the picture for me. Um, and so I didn't really see him like, I sometimes I think about, how life, um, some people's life is so big and so grand, there's no space for him. It wasn't the case. And I know Gina and we talked a little bit. I don't know, Adam, if we have talked about this, but I was homeless for 7 years, from 2011 to 2018, living in the car. And so my life is anything but grand. Um, and I mean, many people can look at it and say, man, your gosh, suck, right? Like, why does he put you through stuff? And quite honestly, looking back, where I see him is life is interesting. I this is always what I believe. I only see what is in front of me, my 6 foot world, right? And for him, he sees the beginning of me and the end of me. the whole spectrum, right? And life is not just about me, it's about everybody. It's about Gina, it's about Adam, it's about my family, it's about anybody and everybody, right? And so he has a vantage point that I will never be able to grasp, right? And so when I look at that point in life, when I look at right now, when I look back, right, I can only come from a perspective of observing and experience, right? Because I don't know what is the plan. I mean, I can have my own plan, but what his plan and my plan might not always align, right? And so in this whole thing, it was rough. Um, Adversity, I do not. So I grew apart with my family fairly early on, um, because of transitioning to the United States, the cultural difference, the language barrier, and my sister and I, we had a hard time carrying conversation. And about, I want to say maybe 2, 3 months ago, I found myself sitting outside of Costco in Parker in the parking lot, sitting in my car with my sister, of having the conversation for 2, 3 hours, which is unheard of. And I'm really grateful for that. I think over time, really, we have somewhere, somehow, I don't know. I don't think it's something she could have done, I could have done on my own, because if we could have, we would have, but we have not, right? But we were holding that conversation, and she finally get to understand a little bit of me. And quite honestly, for me, looking back, like I was talking with her about this. I said, she worries, my parents worry, right, about this boy. Why does he have such a hard time with life? Right. And I don't seek out adversity. Like, I am very happy to be more comfortable in life. Very happy. I'm okay with that. I don't need to be homeless. I don't need to be living in the car. Like, I don't romanticize that. I know sometimes people talk about romanticizing certain things. I don't. Not at all. Um, but what in the world is happening, right? And so I look at it, I think one thing I got out of that whole journey. And so while I was living in the car, I had two dogs that I ended up having to give them up at the animal shelter because they were deteriorating behaviorally under my care, living in the car with me. And I have to give them up at the shelter. And there was a very interesting story there as well. It's a very different story from the bike ride, but I don't know. I guess this is where we're going. I when I was at the shelter, I was given the opportunity to volunteer. And so that was my recovery mentally, emotionally, and financially as well, at the shelter, at the animal shelter, volunteering, working. And looking back, 2018, what did I get out of it? Where is God? I know that was the short question, and here's my long answer, right? Is I don't really know exactly where everything is going, but I think coming out of that, I learned the word compassion. I learned the word compassion not through Webster dictionary, but through it running through my fiber every single day, when I'm petrified, when I'm terrified, or when I get to see people understand. Like, I started volunteering there because they gave me the opportunity to help my Ace and my Chloe, the two dogs that had to surrender, to transition in shelter, because shelter is hard. There's kennel stress. They're very overstimulating, a lot of noise, a lot of smell, none of the routine that they're used to. And so it's often animals don't transition well in the shelter environment. So they actually allow me to help them find a good home, introduce them, and also help them get used to that environment. And because of that process, and I was very fortunate, I was very, very, very well groomed by volunteer and staff over there. So I started working with their shelter animal as well. And I guess I was very gifted. Happy go lucky kind of dogs. it's easy, you're a volunteer, you have leash, they're ready to go with you, right? But those shy, fearful dogs that have um are willing to bite without inhibition, usually those becomes very challenging to find a home in a shelter environment because they don't show well, right? And also, if they're willing to bite without inhibition, they're a liability, they're not safe, right? And so sometimes these animals gets put down. And where I found myself is I am really gravitate towards these animals. Like sometimes at the time, 2011, 2012, like I was homeless, I was unemployed, and I didn't really have anywhere to go. And so I would sit there in the shelter, in a kennel, with a very shy, fearful dog that has behavior problem that is on behavior modification plan. And I would just sit in the kennel. I would do nothing. I will bring some Vienna sausage, a little bit of um, peanut butter, some treats, and I'll just sit there. I don't need to talk to them. I don't need to look at them. I don't need to touch them. And when they become more comfortable, they will come up to me. They'll sniff me a little bit, maybe take some treats and run away, hide in the corner again. And then they'll just keep on doing that. And over time, they have learned to build trust and confidence, knowing that I'm not going to force to touch them. And eventually, they let me. And I have seen so many of these animals blossom in that process. And quite honestly, that was therapeutic for me. It gave me the opportunity to really recover mentally as well. So it's really interesting. Like, I don't really know what God's plans are. Maybe I'm not seeking enough. I don't know. But is was 2011, 2018 a total loss? It's absolutely not a total loss, right? It's definitely rough, but I am really grateful in that process. Like even now, looking at people, we have a term. We say, meet people where they are, right? And I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot. But I also often experience when I hear that, here's the thing with what we just talked about. I am pretty open about sharing my life experience, but I also know the price and the risk of being vulnerable. It's judgment, right? Because you never know how people is going to receive on the other end, right? And the risk is judgment, and I've seen a lot of that. And it is what it is. I have control over what I do, what I share. I cannot control. And I understand the word discernment, I guess. I'm not very good at it, but I understand some people are just not ready for the truth, even though people want the truth. Um, but looking back, I'm really grateful this whole process because I think it really reminds me of what that term, I mean, that whole phrase, meet people where they are and not being, I'm a human. I will have judgment. The difference is what do I do with it when it comes, right? It will come. Um, but if I choose to linger in it, or if I choose to just let it pass through and slow down and take a step back and look at it and look at a person as a person, right? And I think that's the biggest blessing. Um, and it doesn't mean that I don't struggle with that. Sometimes it's not easy, right? Like some story just makes you go like, "Ooh, wow, that's a lot," right? But that is their story, right? And I am being reminded that it's grace um, when we are not in that much adversity because anything can happen. Anything can happen, and yeah, I think this whole process really just allows me to be much softer as a person, um, looking at people, treating people. So
Well, and
I
in that,
have a lot of good.
sorry, you
No,
said something earlier that I want to go back and touch on if I can, because I hear in this there was, we're here to talk about God and work, and you talked about how they brought you in to help, and yes, the entry was to help rehome your dogs, but that opportunity to do something to serve, in this case, a creature in need, but serve others in need as a job. That had to be as much of the healing experience as just sitting with those animals that were in emotional crisis. But the ability to feel like you're doing something good and finding God in that sounds like that was something for you that was pretty foundational in rebuilding your faith and your your hope in your future.
Well, it's interesting that you brought God into this, right? Because God was not in the picture, if you
Right,
recall the timeline,
right.
right? And
Well, he was
and
there
it
whether you were listening or not. That's one of the
Yeah.
things I
absolutely,
learned.
absolutely, right? Definitely, I didn't. He was not on my mind, but he never left, right? And so that whole process, because at the end of the day, I look at work, I look at business, and I recently stumbled onto faith-driven entrepreneur. They have a little group. I think I might have shared with a couple of you. Uh, Journey has a little small group for that, and I think I was stumbled onto it maybe 6 to 8 months ago or something like that. I can't remember now. But one of the words is stewardship, and um, for the longest time, I thought about, for example, I thought about my work, my responsibilities, my car payment, my house, my mortgage. Uh, by the way, this is going to be a tangent. So here we go. Um, but I know before the recording, I share a little bit with my struggles and the financial struggle. I have not had steady income since last October. So it's over a year now, and while I am not surprised by it, and to say that it does not affect me, I'm lying, right? And I was talking to different people, different occasion about this thing. Um, what I have realized is, for the longest time, I thought these are my things, right? My house, my mortgage, my car payment, my business, and whatnot. And quite honestly, what I have been reminded during this whole faith-driven entrepreneurship, that where stewardship came up for me, um, and helped me realize one, my God, he freely gives and he freely takes. He freely takes and he freely gives, right? And so in this whole process, I really don't like, I thought about money. I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day. I said, I am not motivated by money. My lifestyle is so small right now. I'm so afraid of spending money. I mean, sure, I have a big mortgage because I bought the house 3 years ago. I have those big responsibilities. But outside of that, I don't go out, because I'm afraid of spending money. Right. And so I don't really need a whole lot of money, right? And so then the question is, what is the whole point of this whole thing, right? And I was sitting at, talking about work, talking about me, and I realized life is not all about me. It really is not. But to him, I am just as important as anybody else, right? I mean, and that's why he came and died on the cross, right? He didn't die for the nice people or whatever, right? He died for anybody and everybody, right? And so I know I am important to him, and I have to be reminded of my identity. Who am I to him, right? I have to be reminded of all these things, like, and money is such a big topic right now because I think that's something that I am working through right now. I am working through financial insecurity that I did not realize I need to work through. I did not realize that I have so much fear. I'm living in so much fear with it, right? And so, money is such an interesting thing. Like, I have had nothing, absolutely nothing other than maybe $100, $200 in my pocket with a bag of dog food in my trunk with two dogs living in the car with me. That's how little of nothing that I have had, right? And so, do I need much? I don't think so, and I actually thought about selling the house in this whole process, but I am curious where he wants me because I don't really know. And maybe again, I'm not seeking him enough. I don't know. But, what is this whole journey like? I think at the end of the day, what he cares about is who I become, not what I have, but who I become. Right. And I think that's what this whole journey going through being homeless, recovering, getting on the bike rides, um, and I have my appreciation for it, meaning um, I'm so far from perfect. Um, and I mean, I am seeing I'm getting softer and softer as my heart. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm getting a little too soft as a person and find my motivations like, Denny, get up and go do your thing and whatever, right? But I and that's a balance that I am I'm working on. I I don't know how else to put it, but I know I went off on the tangent, but here I am, Adam. Here I am,
No, I
Gina.
appreciate that answer.
What does, the name of our podcast is God at Work. What does that phrase God at work mean to you?
I briefly mentioned about my income challenges, and I came back. So I was in Florida, 2018. I'm sorry, 2024 last year, and I did mention how I met him. I did mention how I left him, but I didn't talk about when I came back to him, right? And so last year I was out in Florida. I was out there for a relationship, and it turned sideways so fast. Um, and so it brought me back to Colorado. But the silver lining of me being out there is, I mean, there are many things, but one of which was it gave me the opportunity to go back to him. And I had the opportunity to go back to church, and I didn't go back to church for the people. That was the mistake that I made 2008 was I thought um, I didn't realize the difference between my relationship with people and my relationship with him is not one and the same. It has nothing to do with each other. And so going back to church last year, the few services I was there, boy, I was a mess. I was bawling for hour and a half each time, and I was so broken, and that was where I mentioned this earlier. I said, meet people where they are. And when I was in his presence, I mean, I was bawling in a sanctuary of 100 some people. Like it's nobody's business, right? Because I was there for him, right? And I felt the acceptance and the embrace that I have never felt before. Um, Literally, that was he met me where I was, how broken I was, and I was in his presence, and he was just holding me, holding every single tear that I had, because he know my heart. It was so clean and it was so pure, right? It was just there was no agenda. I wasn't crying for other people. I was there, and he saw right through it, right? And so that was how I came back after, gosh, 2008. So 15 years, decade and a half later. And to what you were saying earlier, Adam, even though I was away from him, but he was never away from me, right? So meaning, um, talking about work. So for the last year, with growing the business development, I was struggling, and I was pretty open and honest about it earlier. And so maybe 6 months ago, I started driving for Uber and Lyft. And I was driving 60, 70 hours a week on top of my primary work. And I was not sleeping. I didn't have time to sleep. I get home 1:30 in the morning, get back on the road at 2:30 for airport service. Sometimes I would drive through the night, don't get home until 9 a.m. in the morning, and I was not sleeping. I was afraid of sleeping because I would miss reservation. And so I mentioned about faith-driven entrepreneur earlier. One of the topic that came up was faithful versus wealthful. And so I had to pause and think about that for a minute. What does that mean? Right. And so in our society, right, we romanticize, there's a term, uh, when there is a will, there is a way. Yes. And so I was willing through my life when I was homeless, when I was driving 60, 70 hours, because I know I have a certain number every single month that I need to hit to pay for my mortgage, my car payment, all that stuff, right? And so I knew if I can't get those number, I just need to throw more hours at it, even though I don't have them. But that's all I have to do. And what was reminded of me was, if I can will my way through life, where is faith in that? Right? Because if I can do it on my own, I don't need him. Right? If I can be my own provider, I don't need him to be my provider. It was such an interesting pivot, and it's a pendulum, right? It's a pendulum you swing on both ends, right? And what my guy is not is, well, it's not like I do nothing, sit on my couch, play video game all day, and then go out and buy a Lamborghini, and my guy's going to pay for my $4,000 car payment, right? That is not who he is as a provider. But if I do say he's my provider, what does that mean to me, right? Am I learning to step into faith? And I will say it's been a journey, going on that pendulum, back and forth, right? How much participation is too much participation? How much participation is too little participation, right? And so when I look at work, it's been a very interesting journey. And I am learning to embrace when people say it's not about the destination, it's about the process. Boy, I am very okay with just get to the destination. I'm very okay with it. The process is not fun. It has not been fun. But I am learning to appreciate that the process, the journey is a necessity to build character, right? Because I will not understand. I, I will not be able to grasp without experiencing it, right? Had I not gone through the adversity, had I not gone through what going through right now, I would not understand what does it mean by walking in faith, right? And but also not being lazy, right? And so this is such a fine line that, like, I'm having a hard time. I shared before the recording. I've been in the funk, as of late, for the last week or two, or maybe longer. I don't know. And how do I get back? I mean, in the world without God, people just say, just suck it up. And I get that. I get that. And maybe I'm a little too soft. Sure. But I know I was talking to Isaac, a friend of mine, about this, talking about provider. If I look at my expenditure and my income right now, I can very easily say he's not my provider. Because he didn't show up, right? But my guy is not a quick service restaurant waiter and say, "Oh, here's a menu. What would you like to order? You like to order number two in 3 minutes? Perfect. I get that to you in 3 minutes, right?" That's not how he works. But if I am to pay attention looking back, um, for me to not lose a house by not having an income for over a year, if my ego is big enough, I can probably say, "Oh, I've done well, I've saved enough money." But what I have realized is for the last 7 years, this is why I choose to believe. I think he has been preparing me to be able to be where I am right now, even though I'm feeling every pinch of it, but I'm not losing the house because I cannot lose another house, right? Because when I went through that 2011 when I was homeless, it was such a terrifying experience for my family, right? And so I almost draw the parallel. Like, am I in the same place that I was 14 years ago? I don't think it is, and I'm grateful. Um, but looking back for the last 7 years, even though I was not with him, even though I walked away from him, he has still been there providing, preparing me, giving me the opportunity because I have tried. We talk about biz dev, we talk about work. It's so interesting, even for people who don't believe in God or whatnot. It's all about faith, right? Because faith is something you cannot touch. And that's exactly what business development is, right? There's no guarantee. Sure, you can track stacks, you can track numbers game, you can fill your pipeline, this and that. But what I do believe is there's certain times I try so hard, I cannot put things together, even if I wanted to. And when there's opportunity comes, this is what I believe, right? When he has an opportunity come across, like it's so effortless, right? And so where do you find that balance? Um, and this is where I am really trying to lean in. And again, that spectrum, that pendulum, right? How much participation is too much participation? How much participation is too little participation? And where do I sit? Where does he want me to be? Right? Because he want me to lean into him, right? I mean, in our world, people who share the same faith, we know like this is so different, right? Because in the world without him, we promote independence, independence, right? Because when someone who is not independent, it's a problem. It's like, man, this person is so high maintenance, right? And but in where he is, he want us to rely on him. I guess the word it's not dependent, but interdependent. Some people used it, right? So we still have to participate, but he wants us to lean into him, right? And so I am learning. I have so much work to do on myself, and that's the process. This journey. That's the work. That is the work, right? And going back to your short question, Gina, is with work, I came back from Florida and I was struggling prioritize him. And I look back, it was so silly. He does not need me to prioritize him, right? And it's my choice on where I want him to be. Um, but looking back, I really appreciate the journey and the process that allows me to experience going through that roller coaster, going on that pendulum, trying to find where I belong, right? Because he is sovereign and he's there, right? Whether I'm not there or not, that's up to me, right? And so this is an opportunity for me. Like I went back and talk about money. I don't have big needs. I'm not afraid of death. I talked about a little bit about mental health and depression. I think, and I don't want to minimize those people who chose to take their own life. I'm not saying any of that, but I think it's not, it takes more bravery for people to show up every day, get up, and keep going. That takes a lot of courage, a lot of bravery. And so I don't I don't need a whole lot. And money to me is like I'm not motivated by money. I'm not, because if I am, I will be driving so hard right now. I'm getting money, but I am not. I care about the people. I care about what is happening. I care about making an impact. That's what is important to me. And quite honestly, and that's where I'm trying to find in my work. I know what we can do with our work, how it can impact organizations. Um, but I think what I am learning in this whole process is, who am I showing up? How am I showing up and work with the people that I touch, the people I talk to and I encounter? Um, I'm way off on tangent. I have a superhuman ability of doing that. So thank you for entertaining me, and hopefully that answers your question, um, Gina.
Well, Denny, you mentioned that um, meeting people where they are and being there for them. Is that where God is working in your life right now? Do you feel that?
Um, I don't know exactly what it looks like. I don't know exactly what it looked like. Um, but there's definitely a draw, if that makes sense. Right? I will never be too busy for somebody to have a conversation, for them to tell their story. I will never be too busy if somebody is having a hard time, and have a conversation, and maybe, just maybe, offer them a little encouragement, a little hope. Hope is a big word. Hope is a big word. Oh my goodness. Right? Because if there's no hope, why am I waking up every morning? And there are mornings I struggle getting out of bed. There are mornings. So I mean, it's so far from what I do professionally, but again, my work is not who I am. It does not define who I am. It's just an extension, it's just a vehicle, right? I mean, with what we do, cost intelligence, cost saving for organization, help organizations saving hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, it's all great, right? But if we are only putting dollar sign on it, to me, I'm sorry. I'm just not excited. I'm just not. But I am being reminded with my work, maybe the organization I can help, maybe the people I can touch, but also it allows me to have the freedom and have conversation with people. Because I remember when I was at animal shelter, I mentioned about how I would sit there for hours and hours. And one thing that came to my mind was, if I was ever independently wealthy, I don't need money. I would just sit in a kennel with dogs all day. I would be okay with that. I would be very okay with that. And now fast forward a decade and a half later, my heart is in a similar place, right? If I'm independently wealthy, right, I am more than happy to help people, right? Just have these conversations if that can help them get back on their feet. I don't need money. I mean, I do, but like, money does not excite me. Money does not get me out of bed. It really does not. And maybe that's what his work is, right? Is that money is such an interesting thing, right? Like, sometimes people say money is the root of evil. Well, the way I see it is, money is so neutral. It's just a tool, right? Good people with money, it makes them even better people. And people who are mean, money makes them even worse, right? And so money to me is really just a vehicle, it's a tool. Like our church is doing a um, pledge for building a church. We don't have a church right now. And that was a very interesting experience very recently, October of this year. And I made a pledge. It's a very personal pledge, but I have never made a pledge like that before. And I'm being reminded, right, looking back a decade and a half ago when I walked away from church, walked away from people, right? This pledge is not for the church. This pledge is not only for the people, right? It's not for the pastoral staff. It's not for any of that, but for his work, right? Whether if I'm going to be there for the next 10 years or ever, or if I leave that church, this is for him to do his work to touch the people that is meant to be touched by him, right? Whether if I'm going to know them by name or not, it doesn't matter, right? I'm just a little vessel, and the money is just the vessel. That's it, right? And so going back to your question, I mean, I'm saying this. This is going to be a podcast. I don't know how it'll come out to people. I'm not saying work is not important. I'm saying work is only as important as the tool itself, right? My build him building my character, that's what defines me, right? And if this tool, if what I do ended up touching people in a positive way, check. That's all it is. It's no more than that. I don't want to get too romanticized over that because I think in our world sometimes work defines who we are. Without work we have no identity, right? And that, I think that's a problem, right? And so I, for me, is how do I, now I understand that, but how do I continue to show up? How do I show up and be a good testimony? I mean, these are things that I'm struggling with. But since we're having a podcast, being honest and candid and being vulnerable, that's where I am, but I am not forgetting what is important. So hopefully that answers your question, Gina or
Well, I like
Adam.
that you brought up about because it's a common misnomer because people will misquote the Bible and say that that money is the root of all evil. But as you illustrated, it's actually the love of money that is the root of all evil. And that people, that's what they pursue. And that's what because that's where they find their hope for whatever reason. And so I love that you brought that up because that's not an attribute of God as far as being an ATM for us, for lack of a better thing. So, with all of that said, Denny, what would you like our audience to walk away knowing about God?
That's such a big question. And I think to me, the biggest takeaway is just to seek him. He'll let you know because his plan is different for everybody. I mean, I'm not a prophet. I don't have wisdoms for people to be like, oh, you should do this, you should do that. But I think a lot of time, if we seek him, if we knock, he will answer. Might not be at our own timeline, but he will answer in a way that is just mysterious. And so that's only way that I would see is having that relationship because it's not about what does Denny say, what does Gina say, what does Adam say. Like it doesn't matter, right? But at the end of the day, I think for people, if they are seeking, if they want to even care to know or even know of this whole salvation, like this whole thing is maybe just be open to get to know him. I think that's all it matters. I think he works magic, right? With that little crack, he will come in, but he's not going to force himself onto people and say, "Oh, you don't want to believe? I'm going to make you believe." No, he does. He's not going to be like that, right? And so, if people feel like, you know what, huh, maybe I should slow down a little bit and just get to know him a little bit. I think that's all the invitation he needs. And I think, I mean, I hope my little story is not scaring people away with all the adversities because, boy, I'm a little scared of my own story. This life has been, boy, but, but I think the blessing, um, I have anxiety, um, or I don't think I have anxiety, but it's showing up. I don't like to think that I have anxiety, but it's showing up. But the peace when I'm in his presence, I mean, there's nothing you can buy. Like, it doesn't matter how much money. Ooh, right? Like, how many people who has plenty of money, materials, they have their struggles. So we know materials and money don't solve all the problems in the world,
Right.
It's funny,
right?
the Bible is, of course, a primary source here and the most important source, but occasionally I'm a pop culture nerd. And there's a quote by Jim Carrey that I absolutely adore. He said, I wish everybody would get everything they ever wanted so they could understand how it didn't make them happy. And I just think there's some beautiful, kind wisdom in that because there's a man who got everything and most of us could imagine wanting and still fought with happiness and finding it. And so I think to your point, even people at that level who achieve such power, financial, riches and notoriety and still aren't finding the happiness that we're all seeking. So I think that really reinforces what you're saying about God is showing that it's not things that are ever going to make any of us any happier in this world.
Yeah. And to what Gina just said earlier, right? Money, root of evils. It's not that. I mean, and I don't want people to be like, oh, let's sell everything. That's not what we're talking about here. It's the love of it, right? When we start worshiping the
The
car, when we
idol of
start,
money.
right, right, that's the problem,
Hmm.
right? And so thank you for having me.
Well, Denny, I know you work very hard for your company. What would you want our audience to know about you and your business?
You know, with what we do, I love what we do. I know a lot of businesses, they are trying to do good things out there. And oftentimes they don't have the kind of resource, time, or expertise like we do at the depth that we do to look at expense. Because if they are, they're not focused, right? I mean, they can't do everything and be focused. That's the opposite of the definition of focus, right? And so if they feel like they really want to grow and they need somebody to really be their wingman, right? And help them protect what they really work hard for. That's what we're here for, for middle market businesses and nonprofits. Like I think about these Christian universities, higher private educations, I think about what they do. It's important work, and I know what we can do because we're on contingency basis. So if we don't have results, there's no fee for service anyways, and so my encouragement is I think it's going to take a lot of relationship building, trust, because it's not. I apologize. I'm a little sick. I've been sick over a week, so I'm losing a little bit of my voice. But um, I think it's definitely worth having the conversation and see if this is something that can really help them, right? And again, why are we helping? In the world of business, it's all about money. It's all about profitability. I get it. But in the world of kingdom, it's about stewardship. It's about what can we do more with that money, with that resource, right? And so that's what I would encourage. people to explore. And, if there's no opportunity, great. At least we'll do a sanity check for you. But if there is opportunity that we can help, um, I am curious, what can he do with that money? Because he doesn't need money. When he works, when he moves, what's mountain to him? What is $1 million? This is nothing, right? But I think the lesson in this whole process is, how do we become better steward? How do we build community? Um, yeah, I can keep going on, but I'm gonna stop right there.
Well, I appreciate you coming on our show today
Thank
and
you.
sharing and being authentic, because the Christian walk, it would be great if it was just like this, but it's not. It's lots of hills and valleys. And if someone is saying, how do you know that? Read the book of Psalms, for one thing. Read the book of Job. I mean, the Bible is full of stories of imperfect people, because we're all imperfect, right? And so I
Yeah,
appreciate so much, Denny, of you sharing your story. And would you be okay with closing us out in prayer as we close this episode?
it would be a privilege. Let us pray. Father, we come before you. Um, we are so insignificant. Um, we don't matter, really, in the big scheme of things. But to you, we matter so much to you, each one of us, even people who don't yet know you or believe in you. We pray that you move with your sovereignty. And I pray the people who get to listen to this, they will be a little curious about you. Um, whether if we already have the faith, or am curious about you, or not at all, but maybe just that a little crack, a little invitation, you move. And it is your will to prosper us. Maybe not in the way that we understand, but you want to bless us. You want to give us grace. And so thank you for being the North Star you are, being the sovereign King you are. Um, Never waver, even when we are lost. Um, I want to thank you, and I want to praise you, and bless the Gina and Adam as they continue having these conversations with different people. You move through them, you touch people in your own way. Thank you. In your mighty, holy Jesus' name, I pray. Amen.
This is God at Work, reminding you to lead with faith, serve with purpose, and live out your calling. Until we meet again, keep walking boldly in your faith, at work and beyond, and remember, your business is your ministry.